Well, I love that Mumford song, and the reason I love it is because I think it actually has a profound understanding that faith is not belief, that faith is trust. The amazing thing about a spiritual journey is at times you can struggle to believe something or to believe certain things, and then still you're not letting go of God. In fact, at one point, the lyric cries, "Say something, say you love me," and is separating the idea of having to have it all figured out with, "I'm not going to let go of you." And so I am starting this new series called Words, and through now and the holiday, we're going to look at certain words that are important to our Judeo-Christian faith, and it'll take us all the way through Advent and to the holiday. And each week we will look at a different word that you may know, you may not know, but your heart already may know it, or it is speaking something about our faith. So the first word I'm going to go through is a word called Yisrael. Of course, you know the word in English as Israel. Now, Yisrael and Israel are the same word. Yisrael is the Hebrew pronunciation of it. Of course, this isn't the Hebrew spelling of it. This is still using Latin letters, as this is, and then this is the English word. Now, the Hebrew language, part of its wonderment and beauty is it actually has less words than the English language. And this actually helps the language to communicate, and it actually adds to the beauty of that. So here's what I mean. In a Hebrew word all has a three-letter root word. So since Hebrew words have less words Hebrew language has less words to communicate. Words have various meanings, and words have more of an openness than being specific, and you can dance with them. So, for instance, this word Yisrael or Israel, at least scripturally, it means three different things when it's talking about it. It at times talks about the land of Israel, an actual location, Israel. It's talking about the people of Israel, the Jewish faith, the Jewish race, the Jewish people. But it also is referring to a person of Israel. And this is how our life intersects with this word. So I want to tell you about the person named Israel. And so 20 years earlier than the story I will catch you in now, 20 years earlier, he goes sideways with his brother Esau. In fact, his name wasn't Israel then. His name was Jacob. And Jacob had a father and mother, Isaac and Rebekah, and it was a very dysfunctional family, and they had two boys. And Esau was the oldest boy, and in that patriarchal society, the oldest boy gained all the inheritance. That's just how it worked. And so what Jacob did, and I want to be careful here because Jacob is a beautiful name, but the word Jacob means deceiver. That's what the word means. It means deceiver. And so this is exactly what Jacob was. So with his dysfunctional mother, Rebekah, they scheme against their aging father and brother while he's out on a hunt to take the entire family inheritance. And they trick the father, and the father gives the entire inheritance to Jacob, who is pretending to be Esau. Well, what starts is a family rift. In fact, Esau is so angry, he says to his brother, "If I find you, I will kill you." And so that sends Jacob on a 20-year run. He spends 14 years working for the man who would eventually become his father-in-law. And he ends up with a clan and a family and several wives. That's how they did it yet. And now it's 20 years later, and this rift is coming to a climax. Jacob hears that his brother Esau is nearby and is going to come to meet him the next morning with 400 men. That is not a greeting party, that's an army. And he is very scared. And he is figuratively and literally in a desert. He's in a part of Canaan, then it was called Canaan. He's in a part of Canaan that is a wilderness. And so what he does is he gets his entire clan, he gets his entire people, his entire clan, all of his wives, all of his possessions, and sends them away, sends them across the river. And he's going to sleep this one night alone in the wilderness where he will go to meet his brother the next day. In a last-ditch effort, he tries to bribe his brother. He says, you can have my cattle, you can have boatloads of money if you just won't kill me. So he starts a night of sleep, and as you can imagine, it's a night, he's an insomniac that night. He doesn't sleep that night. So this is the background, and this is where you will find out what this word Yisrael means and what it means for you and me as we continue this story. So if you have a Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 32. You can always bring a Bible and follow along with us. If you have a smart device, you can turn there as well through your smart device, or we always show the scriptures here. So let's pick up this story after 20 years of dysfunction and what is about to happen, and we will discover what Israel means. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 servant wives, and his 11 sons, and crossed the Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all 15 men. They wrestle all to the morning. And finally, the Ish, the man, goes, I am not going to beat Jacob. This guy is too much. When the man saw that he could not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. Then the man said, let me go, for dawn is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What is your name? The man asked. He replied, Jacob. Your name will no longer be Jacob, the Ish told him. From now on, you will be called Yisrael, because you have wrestled with God and with men and have won. Please tell me your name, Jacob said. Why do you want to know my name? The Ish replied. Then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God. For he said, I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been spared. The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. So this man, all his life, never dealt with the truth of himself, never dealt with his past, had been a deceiver his whole life, even up to this moment. And finally, on this night, he wrestles with this mysterious man. So where we, in a sense, symbolizes it's God, he says, I named this place Peniel, which means I have seen God's face, and I'm alive. And so what I want to say is one of the things that the Jewish people cherish in their religion is they cherish struggle. Struggle is a good thing. Struggle is the very essence of who they are as a people. And what a number of devout Jews will tell you is, if we are not struggling as a people, our faith is not alive. And I think this is a good lesson for all of us, because sometimes when we are wrestling with things, and especially wrestling metaphysically, which I mean spiritually, or wrestling existentially, which I mean to the very core of our meaning, like what's it all about? Sometimes when we're wrestling, we think we're doing it wrong. We must be missing something. A good Christian, a good Jesus follower would get this and fall in line and not ask questions. But what this story teaches us is this, is folks, struggling is the foundation of faith, and it is the formation of faith. It is not the lack of it. And so when you and I are struggling, asking God, wrestling with God over, I don't know if I still believe, but I won't let go of you. I've got to figure this out. In fact, what the Ish says, he finally wants to tap out the Ish. Goes, I'm out, man. Why are we ending this? Why won't you? Because I'm going to name you Israel. I'm going to give you a name that means you wrestled with God and you won. It doesn't mean won as a victor, as I interpret. It means you made it to the other side. You held on to God and you went through it all and you made it through. So I want to encourage you that struggling doesn't mean something's wrong with your faith. What can happen in our very pop Christian world is, and many times in our Christian development, and I get it, is the need for certitude. We need certainty. So what can happen, this has been my life as a pastor, people come and they're wrestling. They're wrestling with life. They're wrestling with God. They're wrestling with themselves. They're wrestling to make existential meaning of the whole thing. So they come. What does God say? What does the Bible say? I need answers. And I understand that because I've been there. But what can happen is when we only view the faith as certitude. I have questions and somebody gives me an answer, certainly, and now I'm fine. You now eliminate struggle, which struggle is the very essence of faith. And so it'd be like this. A young child and their mother are going out for a day of errands. And in the beginning of the day, the child turns to the mother, Mommy, I'd like some ice cream. I want some ice cream. And the mother first goes, okay, honey, all right, we'll get some in a bit, but let's do our thing. So the child continues to ask. I'll give you the scriptural thing of this. I will not let go of you, Mommy, until you bless me with ice cream. And the mother keeps saying, and finally the mother says this. When all our errands are done, when we have lived life all this day and done everything we need to do this day, I promise you, I will give you ice cream, and you need to believe in that truth. And you need to be certain about it. And so several hours pass, and the child asks, Mommy, I want ice cream. And the mother gets mad and goes, didn't I tell you 2 hours ago? Didn't I promise you I would give you ice cream? And didn't you promise me you would believe? See, I think this is hijacking faith. And this is what happens to many of us. We think faith is a belief and a certitude. I need something. God, I won't let go of you something. God says some sort of promise, and I need to believe in the truth of that. And oh my gosh, if I wrestle with that, if I can't, I must be doing my faith wrong. And so we start to believe indirectly, but certainly sincerely, but we start to believe that faith is belief. No, faith is trust. And so if that child goes all through the day, even if it asks, but still strives. In fact, show that scripture up where I think I give you the English Standard Version again. Could we show the passage again? Look at from now on you will be called Israel because you have wrestled with God and with men and have won. And then I gave you the English Standard Version from this Bible. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. And so when we just continue to strive and hold on, I don't know how this wrestling match ends. I have no certainty, but I'm not letting go. This is faith. In fact, your faith is alive if it's wrestling. So I kind of challenge the antithesis. Folks, if you are not wrestling with something, if you are not wrestling with deep things about God, deep things in yourself, or it's been a long season since you've done that, then you may have a faith practice, you may have a faith belief, but you may not be experiencing faith being alive. So struggle is a good thing. Asking questions is a good thing. Saying, I'm not going to let go of this until I get to the other side of it is a good thing. In fact, what struggle does, second thing, and really kind of the final point I want to make, what struggle does when you are wrestling with God, this is how you know thy true self. This is how you come to know thy true self. Wrestling with God is how you come to know thy true God. Wrestling with God and life is how you come to know thy true self, thy true God, in life altogether. It's not simply by believing in certitude. It's not until you wrestle. So the Ish turns to him and says, I name you, your very name will be, you wrestled with God and got to the other side. In fact, then he builds a memorial stone. He goes, I'm going to name this place. I got a new name. I'm going to give this place a new name. The name of this new place is Peniel, which means I have seen God's face and I'm alive. So what happens is when you go, I'm going to deal with some things in my life. I'm going to go deal with things in my marriage or my relationships. It's going to take wrestling. I'm going to have to wrestle with some things going on in my life. I'm going to have to wrestle with some theological, metaphysical, circumstantial things where I'm trying to figure you out, God. When you are doing that, you discover who you really are. In fact, when people wrestle with things in their life, meaning they ask deep questions about their life, that is how they come to know themselves. In fact, after Jacob is born, the first time we see him introduced, he sneaks into his father, who's kind of old at this point and can't recognize anybody. And his father says to Jacob, who's there? This is when Jacob is in the middle of his deceit. Who's there? And you know what Jacob says? He has the chance to introduce him. He goes, who's there? It's me, Dad. Esau. So what happens is the story of Jacob's ark, it's really a beautiful story. The story of Jacob's ark is really a man who could never be himself. In fact, the first time he introduces himself, he goes, I'm not me. And this is what happens in some of our lives. We want to be, we pretend to be someone else. Also, we don't have to struggle with something or deal with something or wrestle something to the ground. So when someone says, who are you? I don't go, I'm David. I go, I'm someone else. And what's amazing is, so here he pretends to be Esau. Finally, on the night where he wrestles the Ish, the man says to him, so what is your name? And it's the first time in chapters in his life, it's the first time we hear him go, I'm Jacob. Finally, after he wrestles, he's finally comfortable with who he is. He finally knows who he is. And that's when God says, great, we're going to change your name again. And your name will no longer be Deceiver. It will be you wrestled it out with God. And you made it to the other side. So if struggling is the sign of faith, not the absence of it, if struggling is the journey, the right steps to knowing thy true self, thy true God, thy true self and God in life, if those are the steps, what are my next step? What is the next step I can take? Well, here's my first one. The other night, Wednesday night, was Game 7 of the Cubs game. And so I wanted to see it. Liz and I started our marriage in Chicago, and I was rooting for the Cubs. And so, but I was out of town, and I was at a meeting that evening going Game 7 is beginning. So I'm kind of going, hurry up, hurry up. So the meeting ends, and I have to go find a place to watch it. So I find a place, an establishment that has lots of TVs in it. And I go sit there. And I watch it. And while I'm there, I make a buddy. I make a buddy, Jack, who's also out of town watching the game. We can't miss this game. So we engage in the game, but we engage in our histories and our lives. And he's a young guy. He's in his mid-30s, but it's just one of those, we just took to each other. And so he's telling me about his life and adventure and his family and his year-old marriage and his hopes and dreams for life as we're kind of watching the game. And he said something to me, which kind of is this point. He made me reflect on my life. He goes, you know what, David, you know what I believe? He goes, I always believe you got to have some place in life where you're a beginner at something. And he goes, that's what keeps me learning. And I thought, that is so true. And so the last several years, I watched my wife re-enter graduate school where suddenly she's not high man on the totem pole, she's low man. She has to learn something. The last couple years, I myself, in certain areas of my life, I go, I'm going to choose to be a beginner, or I'm low man in the kitchen. And I have to learn. And there's just something about that when you orchestrate your life to a place where you have to be a learner, you're not the master of something. Nobody's turning, or you don't have this all figured out. This can even happen in our faith. I've been a Christian a long time. I've been going to church a long time. I've been in small groups, but I got this figured out. Folks, what would happen if you stepped into an arena where you are suddenly a beginner again and you have to wrestle something out? You will figure out that struggling is the steps and the foundation and the formation of faith. You will figure out that struggling is how you know thy true self and thy true God. So as we end 2016 and we're about to start 2017 and we all kind of go, what's my new 2017 going to be? Maybe this is the year, Master, where you go, I need to jump in and be a beginner somewhere. Maybe it's theological. Maybe it's relational. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it's vocational. But when you struggle, this is where you see God. Here's another one. Are you asking deep questions of God? Are you asking deep questions of your life? This is where I love the Jewish perspective of their faith. If we're not asking questions of God, if we're not struggling with questions with God, with self, with life, our faith is not alive. That's what means our faith is alive. So my question is, are you asking deep questions about your life? Maybe about your past, but it continues to nip you and come back and haunt you. There are things in your life you haven't done with. Here's what struggling does. Here's what I've seen when people go back and deal with things in their past or deal with issues in their life. What happens is when they go and deal with them, maybe they can't let them go. But here's what I mean. Maybe somebody who was abused in their past, you can never turn to that person and say, you really got to get to a place where you let that go. It's like, what? But maybe when that person goes and wrestles with that, wrestles with what happened there, and yes, it's going to be a wrestle, but they hold on and they say, I am not going to let go of you, God, or this until it blesses me. Meaning what? I get through the other side. You may never let it go, but you will now own it in a new way. In a new way where you are free. So are you asking deep questions of your life, of your relationships, of your faith, of your God, of your theology? Are you? This doesn't mean you're losing faith or your faith is dead. It doesn't mean you're going to wander off the road. This is what keeps your faith alive. And then here's the last one. So a beginner somewhere, are you asking deep questions? And then here's the last one. I love what this says. Your name is Yisrael. Why are you naming me Israel? Because you have striven with God. You have endured with God. You held on, and you've been blessed. You made it to the other side. Folks, sometimes when it comes to the things that we're wrestling with, you might have wrestles in your marriage. You might have wrestles in your emotional, mental life. You might have wrestles in your financial, your circumstantial life. And no doubt, there are sometimes life has you in a scissor kick, and you just want to tap out. But there are also times when you just hang on. When you just hold on and not let go. You make it to the other side and you burst through. We just sang this song before. It was singing about two things. God, you're good and you will never let me down. So I don't want to rewrite somebody's lyrics, and I believe that. But I believe there is a journey in every spiritual person's life to be able to say, God, you never let me down. If it's just, God, you never let me down, that's like saying, ice cream at the end of the day, and I guess I just have to believe it. There are times my life has wrestled with God. I go, you are letting me down. I feel let down. But when you get to the wrestle and hold on like Jacob, when you get to the other side, you can name this place Peniel. Why? Because I have seen God. I wrestled with him. And I have discovered that he doesn't let me down. I didn't conclude it as a belief or a platitude. I have experienced it because I held on to him and never let him go. And there were times I did think he was letting me down. But I held on. So here's the great thing. He touches his hip. Oh, he says you win. But one of the things that Ish did, he taps his hip. He must have some incredible move. He taps his hip, and Jacob's hip comes out of joint. He wins the wrestling match, but when he goes to join his family the next day, he looks like he wrestled with God. And Jacob walked with a limp. And what that signifies and symbolizes, at least for me, is he will forever be marked and dependent on God. We see in the New Testament when Jesus teaches about the shepherd and the sheep, and there are people that are experts, I guess, now in first century shepherding. And I remember reading a book that said when a sheep would wander away from the fold, the shepherd would go find it, break its leg, and then put it on its shoulder when you see all the cute pictures we show to the kids. And the reason, at least as this writer said, the reason the shepherd broke the little sheep's leg is so it was ever dependent on the shepherd and it would never wander away. So folks, this is the beauty in what we wrestle. God uses our wounds, as I said last week. He uses our very wounds to mend us. He uses our very questions to build our faith. He uses our doubt to help us cling and hold on. I'm not going to let go of you. Does this make sense? Amen. All right. So let's pray. Father, thank you that wrestling is good. It is. It's not where is faith. It is the sign of it. It is trying to hold on. Thank you that struggling and wrestling with you is how we come to see how you really work, how you really work in us, how we come to face some things in you, in us. So I pray that all of these folks would join me in wrestling. But I pray that we would hold on to you, Jesus, for you touch us in a way that marks us in a way where you use our wounds in a way to forever depend and hold on to you. I pray for those who want to tap out in certain relationships, in certain situations. Their fears are overcoming them. Their questions are overwhelming them. They hear this voice that are saying, you are doing faith wrong. I pray that they would say, God, I'm not going to let go of you until you bless me by taking me to the other side. So I can say, not by belief, but by experience, I saw God's face, I saw him work in my life. And now I walk in a way that shows that keeps me walking to him. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Next week's word is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim. If you can figure out what Mitzrayim means, you get to give the sermon. See you later.